Evolutionary.org Hardcore 2.0, episode 102 coming your way. Today we're going to talk about Beligas anti-aging stack to look and feel younger. So this is going to be a really interesting podcast. Mobster and I, we're going to go over what is anti-aging, how it affects us, what is aging and how it affects us, popularity and growth of anti-aging products, specific approaches to anti-aging. And we're going to talk about Beligas products to help with anti-aging. They have a list. We could talk 3 podcasts about anti-aging products, but we're going to stick to a really core list of products that they have and show you how to use them to your advantage. And you can just go online and order them. And then we're going to talk about why we trust Beligas as well. So let's start with what is aging and how it affects us. And look, modern human beings, we've come a long way when it comes to modern medicine. How many times in your life, think about it, how many times in your life have you had to run antibiotics? Probably many, many times due to infections, due to bacteria. And look, if it wasn't for those antibiotics, you'd be dead a long time ago. I'd be dead a long time ago. Mobster would be dead a long time ago because
multiple times, Steve.
Mobster, actually, a year ago, you went through pneumonia.
Oh, Christ, man. I looked
and without that, you would have died. You would have basically just died.
I had a 3 in 10 chance of dying if I hadn't had the diagnosis of pneumonia. And that's a modern statistic. That's not an old statistic. That's literally undiagnosed people that have pneumonia or double pneumonia. It was roughly 3 in 10. So 30% of undiagnosed pneumonia patients will die. That's in modern times. That's America, that's in the UK, wherever else. Steve's quite correct. From the grazers that pick up infections, food infections, actual serious medical issues that Steve meets me and myself have had, we would have been lucky in ancient times. You would have been considered an old man of the tribe at 35 years of age. You'd have been the wise old man people went to see. You would have died of tooth decay. You'd have died of some rancid piece of meat that you ate, or some rotten piece of fruit, or some poison ivy or something.
The same thing with vaccines. It wasn't for all these vaccines we've come up with over the past 100 years. Where would we be? We got every year people, you have the COVID vaccine, you have the flu vaccine, smallpox, all these vaccines, which have allowed humans to live longer. Medical procedures, when you get a stroke or a heart attack. I know so many people that have strokes and heart attacks in their 40s and 50s. They go to the emergency room. The doctor cuts them open. He clears out their arteries. A few days later, they're out of the hospital. I mean, that's modern medicine. So we've come a long way. If it wasn't for all this, we'd be dying really young. And our ancestors used to die really young. They were lucky to make it to 25, 30 years old. And Mobster's ancestors in the Middle Ages had to deal with plagues and battles and wars, fighting France, fighting the Scots, fighting the Irish. It was nonstop. So really, Mobster's ancestors in the Middle Ages, you guys were living, and my ancestors too. I mean,
even 50 or 60 years ago, Steve. You look at quote unquote film stars, rock stars, whatever, of that generation 50 or 60 years ago, and you look at the age. And let me give you an example. Several really big name film stars of a certain generation, say 50, 60 years ago, and when you look at their age, and then you go and look up a modern film star who's the same age, the modern film star looks better. That's a combination of plastic surgery, naturally, but it's literally, as Steve said, just for our generation, as a population as a whole, is better medical care, better vaccines, better antibiotics.
My point is keeping us alive longer. Now, what can we do to live a healthier? So this is the way I look at anti-aging.
Yes.
Is I want to stay living longer. That's great, but I also want to live healthy. How many people do you know that live to 80, but they spend their last 10 years coughing up a lung with COPD because they smoked? How many
Zimmer frame sticks?
How many people do you know that have lung disease and have no energy because they drank their whole life? How many people do you know that didn't exercise, didn't keep their heart in good shape, so they're basically on heart medication the last 10, 15 years of their life, just getting by day? If they stopped the heart medication in 3 or 4 days, they'd be dead. So that's not the life to live. This is the point of this podcast. And this is why Beligas sponsoring this podcast. Because
Yeah.
I want to show you that there's better ways that you can live to 80, 90, 100 years old and live a long and healthy life and still be kicking ass in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, getting women or getting men, if that's what you're into, doesn't matter. But you can live a long, healthy lifestyle and be successful. We literally just yesterday found out another bodybuilder died.
Yeah.
And how old was he, Mobster?
36. I thought he was 38. He was 30 fucking 6.
Yeah. So
36.
look, he lived to 36. And listen, okay, let's be honest. It didn't just one day he died. The guy had suffered. Okay. But the thing is, he was suffering a lot because he was abusing his body and he reduced his age. There's a difference between using these products that we're going to talk about correctly, and this is what we're going to do on this podcast, and abuse. Because when you abuse anything in excess, is going to reduce your life. So it's not only important to show you how to use these products and which products to use, but it's also important to understand that we have to do it the right way. And when you do excess, you reduce your lifestyle. And when you're doing stupid things, like let's say riding a motorcycle with no helmet, that's going to reduce your that's going to reduce your lifestyle. Or doing stupid things like what else is stupid, Mobster? And doing drugs and smoking and drinking and going out every night to the bar. Some people literally, it's the Homer Simpson. I don't know if you know who that is, Mobster, in your country.
Yeah.
But Homer Simpson, every day, what he would do after he worked at the nuclear power plant, he'd go to the bar and drink. That's the Homer Simpson approach. And a lot of people live that lifestyle. And when you go live that lifestyle, you end up dying. You see these people that are under the overpass. It's a sad thing. These homeless people that they're skinny, but they're fucking 35 years old, but they look like they're 65 years old. They look like they look older than you, Mobster, and you're 60, and they're 35. They're half your age because they do nothing but drink alcohol and do drugs and eat fast food. But they're skinny. So it's not about I'm skinny, I'm fat. It's about what's going on inside your body. You can be a gorgeous looking guy, 6'5", 250-pound, huge ass bodybuilder, but you could be dying inside, and your life expectancy would be 40 years old. Or you can be someone who looks good on the outside and lives a healthy lifestyle all the way to 90. So really, that's the whole objective of this podcast, Mobster. Go ahead and take it away.
Listen, guys, especially you younger listeners, there's an argument to be made that we certainly, when we're younger, consider ourselves to be somewhat invincible, and perhaps you almost are. You're not bulletproof, obviously, but when I say invincible, you're not seeing lines. You're not literally having a conversation with your buddies, which I do, about what aches today. You're not, even me pushing crazy shit in the gym is arguably a risk factor in terms of me getting injured. But as an example, your recovery from injury when you're younger helps. I have the disadvantage, such as it is, of having had drug abusing and alcohol abusing members of my family pass away and a relatively early age because of that drug and or alcohol abuse. I've argued for the longest period of time that I have somewhat of an advantage simply because I work out, simply because I've never smoked. I think my dad literally made me drag on one cigarette when I was 15 or 16, and I never liked it and never smoked since. I don't vape. I don't use recreational drugs. Yes, I use PEDs, and yes, there's a risk factor in there. Yes, there's a risk factor just from the sheer size of myself, the body weight that I have, and so on and so forth. But I actually, when all four brothers, including myself, were alive, there was a point, Steve, where I, the oldest, looked the youngest. There's only one left, and I would still say that I look younger than he does. And I still got lines around my eyes and whatever else. And like I said, as we age, certain processes naturally take place. There's a sort of science to the whole regeneration of cells in all of your parts of your body and how frequently that takes place. And obviously what happens at some point as we get into the latter part, the second half of our life, and I'm definitely into the second half there, Steve, that the processes of replacement slow down. And if you view the human being as a machine, and we talked about heart rate and lung function and all those kind of things, we're kind of somewhere in the middle. The really biggest animals on the planet have the slowest heart rates, and the smallest animals that have hearts, their hearts race at 100 miles an hour, Steve. I think a mouse is like 200 beats a minute. I believe an elephant is something
Well,
like
look
35, 45.
look at a tortoise, how slow
Yeah,
they are and how
yeah.
chill they are when they
And
have
he's
a threat.
200 years old, Steve. 200 plus years old.
They go in their shell and they hide and they wait till the danger passes and they come back out of the shell. So they're chill, they're calm, they're slow, and they
Yep.
live a long time. And then if you're like stressed out and crazy, you're
Yes.
gonna live. So part of it too is mental, is you've got to just chill. Like you ever like run into like a 90-year-old who's in good shape and they're the types that go play. You see them in the tennis courts, or you see them in your case, Mobster, at the croquet, whatever they call the croquet field, and they're still out there and they're doing whatever. And
Shuffleboard, Steve.
yeah, they're
That's what Steve's accused me of.
shuffleboarding and they're swimming, they're in the pool,
Yeah.
the old
But
people
they're
pool.
relaxed. They
They're
are mentally
chill. They don't
not
let shit.
stressed.
They don't sit there and watch the
No,
fucking news all day
no.
and stress themselves out over what's going on. You think our ancestors, you think your ancestors in 1300, while you guys were battling the Scots, you think you guys worried what was going on in China? Sat
No.
there and watched the news like, oh my God, they're killing people in China. You can't worry about that shit. Yeah, it's fucked up. We don't want to see people dying halfway around the world. We don't want to see people dying, a mile away. We don't want to see this. We don't want to see people at the emergency room being dragged in because they were climbing a ladder. And someone told me the story the other day. They were climbing the ladder to cut off a tree branch, and they slipped and they fell, and the tree branch went right through them. So they ended up getting in their truck and driving to the emergency room with a fucking tree branch on their entire.
Yeah. I've seen these ones.
We
But
don't want to
people
see
stress over
that.
people stress over stupid shit.
That's why people who work in the medical field, they're nervous wrecks, and those are the people that we don't pay enough to, but we should, because they're the EMTs and the nurses and those types of people. Those people, they deal with a lot of shit, and they see that every day, and it's really hard to live that lifestyle and our graveyard shift. I tell people on the forum all the time who come on, we see this mobster, they're like, well, I work the graveyard shift. How do I get my training in? How do I get my sleep in? I'm like, dude, let me tell you something. You live the graveyard shift and you make a career out of living the graveyard shift for 30 years, you're going to shorten
your life.
You're going to shorten your lifestyle.
Yes.
I hate to break it to you. We're not nocturnal.
Yeah, by about 5 years on average, Steve. I've seen that.
So all this is important, like lifestyle and structure and consistency and sleep. All this affects your lifestyle, and all this has an effect on how long you're going to live and how healthy you live. But at the end of the day, they come back and say, well, Steve, I make $5 more an hour working the graveyard shift. And I say, you know what? That's your decision. You want to make a little more money, but live less of a lifestyle. Again, there's an economic thing, when it comes to things too, that to factor in. And sometimes we have to take years off our life. Sometimes we have to have stressful jobs. I was talking to someone the other day about this. I said, look, is there any 6-figure-a-year job out there where you're self-made and actually have to work for it? I'm not talking about a trust fund baby who gains interest on their investments or something like that. But I'm saying any 6-figure job where there isn't stress, fuck yeah. It's hard to find a job like that's 6 figures a year without a lot of stress. So I hate to break it to a lot of you out there, but if you want to make a lot of money, there's going to be a stress element, but you have to learn, as Mobster said, to chill out.
Yeah.
And what I do, because I have a stressful lifestyle, I use the gym and I use exercise to get that baby batter out. And that helps me relax. That helps me get my blood pressure back down on a stressful day.
You're more chilled than I am, Steve. You're way more chilled.
No, I'm not. Trust me, I'm not, buddy. But let me tell you something.
On some things you are.
I have people.
Let me do it this way, Steve. I've done. But
this is my point, though. I have people who work with me. You know what they do on a stressful day? They go drink, or they go do drugs, or they go smoke pot, or they go vape, or they go smoke. And this is a disease that you have to get away from. You have to learn to get de-stress the correct way. The yoga, I talk about yoga a lot on the forum. I'm like the only person who talks about yoga, and a lot of people don't want to do yoga, okay? But you're making a huge mistake by not doing yoga, because yoga is a great way to relax. You do a yoga session for an hour, hour and a half. You come out of that, all that sweat and all that stress is out of your body. So you have to do things when it comes to anti-aging that you may never have thought that you do, or you may
Yeah.
not want to do, but you have to do those things if you want to live a long lifestyle. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are certain elements of my lifestyle back in the day where I've done 18-hour days, 12-hour days. I used to do weeks at a time, where I think 1 week was equivalent of doing 2 weeks, nearly 80 hours in a week. And I'm not even right at the top of that. I know that there were some of our listeners that are doing 90 and 100-hour weeks. The problem was that stuff made me ill. It did give me the advantage a little bit, and I was also kind of sensible when it came to fiscal planning. So that certain elements of my life came together probably about 20 odd years ago, Steve, where I didn't have any mortgage anymore. So I didn't have to worry about the interest rates of mortgages. I was earning sufficient income that if I wanted to carry on doing more hours, I would have a better lifestyle, or I could have a more relaxed, less stressful lifestyle and rely on a little bit less income. And I made those decisions 15 or 20 years ago. I've probably been living that kind of lifestyle for the last 10 or 15 years, in terms of not having done a full day's or certainly a full week's work for probably 10 or 15 years at least. Right. And so simply being able to not worry about rush hours, paying for my car, making car payments, as you would say, making house payments, having to pay rent to people, and all that kind of stuff makes things. And I do exactly the same stuff as Steve in terms of hitting the gym. So that helps. I try to set aside certain things, whether it's laying on a sofa here in the office. I've got a recliner chair upstairs in the library, 2 of them, and other bits and pieces where I literally have 15 to 20 minutes a day where I'm like doing nothing, thinking about nothing. I have those little. I have the advantage of being able to have the quote unquote mindful moments. I'm quite good at dealing with stress in that I'm probably a little bit more tense. I'll kick ass for 5 minutes, get shit done, and then not have to think about that crap for the rest of the day. Most people don't have that advantage. You've got to work, you've got to make payments on your car, payments on the things that you wanted for the house that you thought were important, which are not, and so on and so forth. And then there's just, look, all of these factors, all of these things. It's no good me and Steve saying, oh, we've got elements of our lifestyle which are sorted. The reality of the situation is not everybody has that. Sometimes you have to do certain things. You've got a missus, you've got kids, you've got a mortgage. I can't do what you do, mobster. I can't live in a fucking cave on sitting on a milk crate. I have to go out and work. I have to be able to earn this money. I have kids. I want them to get educated. I want them to have a better lifestyle. So you do these things. So what else can you do? Let's start very, very quickly, Steve, in terms of, listen, guys, training absolutely helps. As a de-stressor, it helps. As a way of keeping your muscles toned and your skin tight, training helps. Eating better obviously helps. Steve's talked about gut health a bunch of times, and the whole gut health thing is becoming a thing in and of itself. We could probably do a show specifically on gut health. I think we've touched upon it on a few shows. So literally being able to digest good food, healthier options, literally making the option to eat better. So more vitamins, more minerals, more electrolytes, making sure that you stay hydrated. Some of these things are so obvious, but we don't do them. Do we drink enough pure water? Do we drink filtered water? Do we eat enough fresh fruit and vegetables? Most of us, and I'm going to include myself, do not eat enough fresh fruit and vegetables. So even just adding those things to our lifestyle, putting them into the diet, especially the organic, locally grown, minimum fertilizer type products, at some point, especially over a longer period of time, you'll feel better when you're eating them. You'll feel better in yourself. You'll be less stressed. You'll be better able to handle stress in the case of high antioxidants in your diet, and so on and so forth, Steve. And these things give you good, better eyesight. For example, the fish oils that I use, vitamins for skin health, Steve, hydration for skin health, and then and again, gut health, and then again, even things like recovering from training. So all of these things matter. We move into the specific stuff here, Steve, the popularity, and I'm going to touch on this now. Anti-aging as a industry, as a series of products, from makeups with peptides, collagen has become incredibly popular in makeup and face creams and so on and so forth. We talk about bone broth on the forums all the time. We talk about use of collagen products all the time. This is a combination, again, of skin health, so that you have less wrinkles, more less, you lose elasticity to your skin, when you get older. So putting some of that elasticity back, basically making it more supple, more hydrated, better for bone health, joint health, tendons and connective tissue, even the fascia, the membrane around your muscles, and so on and so forth. All of these things become a factor. And the industry growth as an anti-aging clinics, and we see this when we talk about TRT, we will touch upon that as well, is become an enormous sector of the market. Talk about that a little bit, Steve, as an industry in and of itself, and
Yeah.
how that led to peptides and hormones that we're going to discuss.
I think like 10 years ago, or even, or definitely 15 years ago, you go to the supplement store or the health food store, and you wouldn't even see collagen products. Now there's a whole aisle of them. So, I think that I'm very skeptical about their ability to help you. And you're not going to convince me that a powdered collagen is going to be more effective than what Mobster mentioned, making your own homemade bone broth with a nice piece of grass-fed bone, beef bone, and putting it in that bone broth, or wild fish bones, putting it in the broth. We see people, I go fishing with a lot of people from other countries, and what they do, they always ask me, they're like, Steve, can I have, after you clean your fish, can I come by your place and grab the bones? I say, yeah, no problem. I mean, they want the fish head, because they want to make fish head soup, the fish head, because it has the brain, it has the fats, it's got a lot of bone in it. They want to cook that fish head. So what I do is when I clean my fish, I keep some of the bones for myself, and I give them the fish heads, and I give them some of the other bones that I don't use. And they cook it. And what happens is when you cook it in a pot in broth, that stuff breaks down. But you don't want to overcook it, because if you overcook it, now you're losing it. That collagen and all those good fats and all that stuff that's in those bones. And what happens is it gets into the broth, and then you use a little filter. You don't want to filter it out, but you want to kind of just get rid of the bone, so you don't accidentally eat a bone and choke on it. And then after you do that, now you have that bone broth left over. So it's a really, really good way of getting collagen that way. But yeah, you're right, Mobster. These collagen products are all over the place. And do they have some benefits? Maybe, yeah, they have some benefits. But I think just like any other supplement that's being sold out there, a lot of times what ends up happening is they overmarket these products, and they do a lot more promises than what they actually deliver. So it's important for you out there, if you want to get the best benefits of collagen, to do it. But you're right, it is a huge industry, and a lot of people are jumping on board to using it. But it's just like using protein powder versus actually eating medium steak
Or something.
yeah
Yeah.
You're
Steak
going to
and
get
chicken
more
breast.
protein and nutrition and good quality protein from that
Yes.
steak than you are that protein
The
powder every time.
macronutrients, Steve. You
Yeah.
don't get macronutrients in the protein powder. Let me ask you one more question before we start talking about specific products and how effective they are. Talk about the Mediterranean diet, and specifically also the blue zone, which you and I have discussed when we come to aging and older populations.
Yeah, so the blue zone thing, I didn't even know what that was like 20 years ago. And I started reading up about it 20 years ago, and I've been studying it ever since. And we had on the old podcast, we had a couple guys come on and get more into it. But the blue zones, there's different parts of the world where people live longer and healthier. We're talking about people, they're living 80, 90, 100 years old or more, but they're living healthy, and they're not on any type of medication. They've got no issues with their organs. They've got no cancer rates are super low. And it's just like, what are they doing differently than other parts? Like literally in California, it's called Loma Linda, California, which is a blue zone. But if you drive like 30 minutes inland, the cancer rates are high. Everything, is obesity is high and all this stuff, but they, in their community, they don't have those issues. So what are they doing differently? And one of the common denominators they're doing when it comes to anti-aging is fasting. And they do different types of fasting. Now, different blue zones around the world will do different types of fastings. Icaria in Greece, which is an island off of Greece where it's a blue zone, they actually fast 6 months total out of the year because of their Greek Orthodox religion. So they do it for religious reasons. Other blue zones do it for different reasons, not necessarily religious reasons. Like Okinawa, Japan, they do it more for spiritual reasons and for health reasons. So it depends on what blue zone you're living. But when it comes to fasting, they do a lot of fasting, and what fasting does in the body is it increases growth hormone naturally. And we're going to talk about some growth hormone products later in this show. It also does something called autophagy in the body, which is actually recycle old and bad cells, including cancer cells, and in our body. So you're getting rid of the cancer cells and you're boosting your good cells. So that's going to boost your immune system. It's going to make your body stronger. So there's like 100 different benefits of fasting: gut health benefits, stem cell benefits. When it comes to fasting, obviously increasing insulin sensitivity benefits. And
Yeah.
this is a reason why in the blue zones, they don't even know what diabetes is in the blue zones. But if you drive 30 minutes away from the blue zone, 30% of the population has diabetes. So they're doing a lot of different things. The diet, they're following a very good quality diet. They're following, they're not stressing out. They have a strong family and friend bond where they can depend on people. Being able to depend on people is an important thing. Being able to call someone up and be like, I have surgery tomorrow. Can you give me a ride to the doctor? That's
Yeah.
huge. Having
Yeah.
someone you can call when you have a stressful day is huge. We've seen this with addicts in the past. Those numbers that they have, when you're feeling depressed or you're an
Yeah. Your
addict or
rigorous
whatever.
number now. Yeah. Yeah.
These people actually save lives on a daily
Yes.
basis. And they sit there and they wait for phone calls to come in from people who are about to kill themselves or from people who are on drugs and they can't get off their drug addiction. And the people, they motivate them, they help them, they give them advice. They're there just to talk to them. And having that in your life is a huge way to extend your life as well. Because, we all go through bad things and sometimes
Yeah.
we need someone to talk to. So if you don't have anyone to talk to, that's a problem. So that's why those 1-800 numbers actually started, is for some people who don't have family and friends to go to. They may have a 1,500 Facebook friends, Mobster, but guess how many of those Facebook friends are real friends? None.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Am I wrong on that? So
No,
a
you're
lot of
right, man.
people.
100%.
Yeah,
Let me just give you an example, guys. I had a conversation yesterday, and I saw the same fella today who's using the TRT dosing, trains in the gym, but he works sometimes has them away for because he drives international tour trips. So France, Spain, Italy, Switzerland, so on and so forth. And sometimes that's 8 days away. And it'd be 30, 40, 50 hours driving over the course of that period of time. It's normally 2 drivers. And literally the conversation yesterday was, the pee the day before and blood come out. And straight away, I'm like, right, doctors then, we're not going to have that silly, we don't fucking ignore it anymore conversation. Your wife's told you, your partner's told you, get to the fucking doctors. I'm telling you to get to the doctors. It probably isn't using 300 milligrams of cypionate a week for your TRT. We're not going to fuck about and ignore it. We're going to the doctors, aren't we? Meaning, so he's booked in for the appointment. He's got a urology appointment booked in. He's already seen the doctor yesterday when I spoke to him this morning, and so on and so forth. I like the fact, certainly in my generation and my dad's generation, Steve, there were conversations that you didn't have that we now have. We're way more likely to talk about prostate. Men are becoming even more comfortable than they ever were before about mental health. Literally, as Steve says, excuse me, having conversations about things that we used to keep to ourselves, dealing, for example, with post-traumatic stress, whether that's an accident, whether you're the military, the police, losing a baby, whatever, and not bottling that shit up. All these things help with your mental and to a lesser degree physical. Just before we move on, Steve, and I'm just reminded of this, something, again, this is actually more specific to the diet. When I mentioned to you earlier on the Mediterranean diet, Steve and I have discussed this in the past, and we go, it's remarkably high in fats from cheeses and creams and oily foods that have been cooked from olives, for example, and certain other foods. But when the healthy fats, including fish, for example, with the blue zone that Steve referred to in Japan, the healthy fats, the fact that these all are coming from relatively highly organic, locally grown products, etc., versus, for example, a McDonald's or a KFC or a Burger King or an In-N-Out or any of the dozens and dozens of places that we can refer to. Silly example against the absolutely amazing Christmas coffees that certain Starbucks and Costas, etc., produce. And then you look, and it's the equivalent of 16 teaspoons of sugar, and it's 1,200 calories, and it's just a fucking sweet drink with coffee in. And you start to look at the things that we have in modern society, and we compare them to these quote unquote primitive slash simpler societies with higher levels of fat, but with much higher levels of healthy fat. And you see the difference in health, cancer rates, death rates, and specifically it says, because of the topic of today, living longer and more functional slash healthier lives, in spite of the fact they're having these kind of diets, Steve, before we move on.
Yeah, so let me kind of so on these, what's interesting about the blue zones is they actually it's a high carb diet. So but the thing is, the carbs that they're eating is very different. I'll give you and I'll explain. Like in Okinawa, Japan, a huge part of their diet is sweet potatoes. I mean, huge. And we're talking about on a feeding day where they're not fasting, there's a good chance they're going to be eating a sweet potato, either raw or cooked or chopped up or in some type of soup or something. So sweet potatoes are huge. They're very high carbs. In Icaria, Greece, it's a lot of uh, uh, peas and beans and stuff like that. So, and then in Costa Rica, with Nicaria, Costa Rica, they um they are heavy on fruits, okay, which are high carbs. So in these blue zones, we see a pattern of a big part of their macros. We're talking 60-70% is actually carbs, and very little protein, and the rest is fats, but they're good fats, as Mobster mentioned, and very, very little or no dairy. They don't even know what dairy is in these places. Maybe they'll have some raw goat cheese in Sardinia, Italy, or in Icaria, Greece, but very, very little dairy and very, very little protein. So it's a low protein, moderate to low fat, and a high carb type of diet. But the thing is, it's the right macros, it's the right types of carbs. It's not the cake and the ice cream and the cookies and the breads and this other crap. They don't even know what that is. But it's the high quality carbs, the peas, the beans, the fruits, the veggies. These high quality carbs is what they're going after. And that's what's working well for them. That's keeping them living longer. So that's very, very important. It's really like, we can take the Native Americans in America, for example. And what happens to the Native Americans, they didn't even know what diabetes was. They didn't even know what obesity was. I mean, they were skinny, like the famous, even the leader of the tribes, like Osceola and these types of guys in Tecumseh. You look at pictures of them, they're lean. They're not fat, even though they were the leaders, right? And they had access to all the food they wanted. But then what happened was, when your people, Mobster, came over and stole the land, and you introduced them to all these shitty foods, that's when they started. That's when they had, and the Germans started.
The Dutch and the Scotch.
The Germans had to sell their products to someone, right? The wheat and the corn and the breads and all this shit. So that's when they started getting the diabetes and the cancer. And it's up now. The Native American tribes have the highest obesity in America, even more than the people in the Deep South. So it's amazing how just changing your diet can make a huge difference. And they were the natives in America in the 30s and the 40s, they were getting wealthy. Okay, some of these tribes are getting wealthy, and now they're getting wealthy from oil at that time, right? And what happens when you have wealth? You can eat whatever you want, right? They were spending $600-700 on the grocery bills at that time, which is insane today. That's thousands of dollars, insane, right? And what ended up happening was they were eating so much food and getting fat that's when these diseases came around. So literally just changing your diet in one generation made them go from in shape and lean to being fat and obesity. And now today, who are the richest people in America, Mobster? The natives. The native tribes. You know why? Because casinos. So now the tribesmen, you look at pictures of them, whatever, they have these big guts. They're living like kings. Okay. They're billionaires. They're the richest people in the world. Richest people in America for sure, and likely richest people in the world are these tribes. And all their leaders are fucking fat and obese because they can eat what they want when they want. So that's the problem. It's the diet. A big part of the blue zones is the correct diet, not what they're eating. And damn, they get some good food over there, man. If you ever go to these casinos and these buffets, woo, they got good food, Mobster. You would go crazy eating all the food that they're eating. So that's what it's all about for sure. You've got to fix your diet. If you want to live a long, healthy lifestyle, it starts with diet. So make sure you get that taken care of first. All right, so let's move on to the products from Beligas that can help with anti-aging. And Beligas, they have a lot of stuff. I mean, we could do like 2-3 shows on the stuff they have that can help you anti-aging. But you know, we put our brains together, Mobster and I. We put together a list that you can start with. Now, what is the first thing they're going to want to do if you go to an anti-aging clinic? They're going to want to test your testosterone to see where testosterone levels at. So low testosterone is not good for you. High testosterone is not good for you. So you got to get on the proper amount of testosterone. Now, what is the proper amount of testosterone? That's up for debate. Okay.
Yes.
Most people, though, will agree if you run too much testosterone, you're going to increase your red blood cell count, your hematocrit, your blood pressure too high, and it's going to work against you. So these people out there who say, oh, testosterone is good for you, testosterone extends your life and all this shit, they are partially lying to you because you've got to run the testosterone at the correct dose. So what is the correct dose? It can be anywhere from 80 or 90 milligrams a week. It can be up to 100, 125 milligrams a week. Some people, it's 150 milligrams. It just depends. You got to run the blood work when you're a few weeks into the testosterone to make sure that you're running it at the right amount. Also, testosterone is suppressive. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about on this list that's suppressive. The other stuff we're going to talk about is not suppressive in that way. So when you run testosterone, your pituitary glands are going to shut down, which means if you're planning on coming off, you're going to have to do a PCT. But a lot of people, they just stay on, Mobster.
Yeah.
And it's called testosterone replacement therapy. And a lot of people are doing that these days. I know you just went on TRT.
Yeah, just a few weeks before my 60th birthday.
Yep. So a lot of people get on it. You want to wait as long as possible to get on TRT. You want to use your own. It's like having a tree in your backyard that's growing money. Okay. It's growing money for free in your backyard. You don't want to chop that tree down until it's absolutely necessary to chop that tree down. Your body produces its own testosterone free of charge.
Yep.
Why shut it down forever unless it's absolutely necessary? So, but if you do want to go, so testosterone does have anti-aging properties for that reason. Like I said, if you have too low testosterone, it can reduce your life. So if you run a proper amount, it can extend your life. So that's why it's on this list. So Beligas has several options. They have a testosterone cypo, it's called, which is testosterone cypionate. It's the number one selling type of testosterone ester. 200 milligrams a milliliter. They have it's called ethotestosterone, which is testosterone enanthate, 300 milligrams a milliliter. They have an ethotestosterone 450 milligrams a milliliter. And this one, they actually have a warning on it. And Mobster, you can talk about the warning for us. They have a warning about this one when it comes to post-injection pain. So
So in previous years, I was a commentator on if you will insist on using high milligram per milliliter testosterone type products, the risk factor for post-injection pain was relatively high. And this was a combination of literally the amount of testosterone in solution, the solution itself, the oil that was being used, and so on and so forth, and to a smaller degree, the small amount of benzoyl alcohol that was added for antibiotics for, stopping you getting infections issues. In recent years, as Steve and I have talked about on other shows, that's actually decreased. The oil quality is improved right across the industry as a whole, in terms of, for example, much higher usage of grapeseed oil, way less likely to see oils that can cause allergic responses and therefore post-injection pain in some users, and so on and so forth. And the industry as a whole, because of the competition, has had to improve to stay ahead of the rest of the competition. And ironically, the whole industry has been affected by that and meant that we see far less likely post-injection pain being an issue, infections being an issue, the abscesses that we used to see just 20 years ago, and so on and so forth. However, there's still going to be the odd individual that will respond. We see products as high as 500 milligrams. And I would still say, well, you could do that. And if you do well on that product, great. But there'll still be a small percentage of you that is a risk factor for. So they have to say this stuff. The other thing, Steve, and again, I'll read off the next one. They've got a super testosterone, which is 400 milligrams. And that's broken down with testosterone decanate, testosterone isopropiate, testosterone phenylpropionate, and testosterone propionate in different ratios. I could read the numbers out to you. And even a tritestosterone light, 350 milligrams, which is 200 milligrams of testosterone enanthate, 100 milligrams of testosterone cypionate, and 50 milligrams of testosterone propionate. All of these, including the higher dosages ones, could be used, for example, Steve, half a mil instead of a mil of the 350, 400, and 450 products as a higher dosage towards 200 milligrams there or thereabouts for TRT purposes. So you don't have to use a 200 milligram cypionate. You don't have to use perhaps what an actual anti-aging clinic does. You can self-TRT, which we talk about all the time. Obviously, we recommend getting blood tests to monitor what else is going on. But again, at the same time, seeing where your own testosterone levels using TRT products are. And for example, you might find that you're uncomfortable, want to drop it to equivalent of 150 milligrams a week, as low as some of the numbers that used to be given to TRT patients, or a little bit higher because you train, because you go to the gym and so on and so forth, and for that sense of well-being. But it doesn't have to be the straight, most popular TRT in terms of testosterone cypionate or SIPO, as it is here for 200 milligrams a milliliter from Beligas. You can use the higher dosage products. You're just injecting less. And arguably, Steve, less injecting is better. And again, specifically for CRT and specifically for that, as I said, that the tighter muscle tone, the fact that you're able to still kill it to some small degree in the gym, even though you might be the wrong side of 40 or 50 or 60 years of age, and that small sense of well-being, the sense of feeling younger and the sense of vitality by using, for example, a 450 milligram product, but only half or 3/4 of a milligram. What do you think on that, Steve, before we start to talk about products like the growth hormone?
Yeah, and some people like blends. They're super testosterone, they're tritestosterone light. They have different blends in them, different esters. Some people feel better. And this is similar to Sustanon, where you have 4 different blends. So on these, you have different blends all in one, and you're able to inject them, once a week. You can go twice a week if you want. With the super testosterone, you can inject it once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks even, because it's got long esters. It's got the decanate ester, which is a very long ester, which makes up half of it. So some guys feel really good on blends, and some guys are like, it doesn't matter to me. Test is test. So you really got to experiment and see. But if you're going to use this stuff long term for TRT, for the anti-aging benefits, you may want to look at the blend that includes a longer ester. This way you don't have to inject as often. So you can do just 1 pin of the supra testosterone 400 milligram a milliliter every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, and you'd be getting a plenty of testosterone in your system at the same time. So the next one we're talking about is the HGH. It's called Beltropin, and it comes in a 36 IU pen. And look, they make it so easy for you. It comes in the pen versus buying the HGH kit and you having to mix it and all this shit. The pen makes it easier. And you can go online and watch videos about how to load the pen and all that stuff and switch out
how to measure it out. Yep.
And how to switch out the needle.
The growth hormone boosting, the growth hormone, the well-known anti-aging effects of using growth hormone. I'll start with a couple here, Steve. One is obvious again, and this is just the superficial skin. And you see people having growth hormone injections, and there's a before and after type photograph, and the skin just looks healthier. Little deeper lines become less deep, shallow lines pretty much disappear. They're remoisturizing, they're hydrating more, and again, there's that sense of well-being they get. There's also an argument to be made in terms of tissue repair. And I'm not just talking about the skin here, but I'm talking about connective tissue. So those little tiny aches and pains that you get when you get older, certainly when you're the wrong side of 40 and the hormone starts to cascade and drop off, etc. You've boosted your testosterone. Now you're looking at slightly more expensive growth hormone. I'll argue here, Steve, in terms of growth hormone, on a cost per IU basis, it is as cheap as it's ever been. What cost $500 5 or 10 years ago, even if the price is the same now, when you think about the price of everything else going up, and growth hormone has arguably stayed where it is, it's actually slightly less than that on a cost per IU basis. It's the best price it's ever been for the last 15, 20 years. So a small amount, I would use, what would you use, Steve? I would say two IUs a day for as long as I possibly could. How would you run this product yourself?
So when you use HGH, it's not like running testosterone. So when you run testosterone, like I said, you have that money tree in the backyard. Once you go on TRT, you chop that money tree down, it's gone for good. Okay. Will you be able to ever come back from it? Maybe, but the longer you stay on, the more you're going to have to commit to staying on for life. But with HGH, you can play it by ear. You can do 5 days on, 2 days off. You can do every other day. You're getting the HGH, you're getting a pulse effect. So it's not shutting you down. It's not suppressing your testosterone or anything like that. What it's doing is it's coming into your body and it's basically boosting the growth hormone artificially in the body. So your growth hormone in your body fluctuates throughout the day. We talked about earlier about fasting. And I said, when you fast, your growth hormone goes up. Your growth hormone goes up straight up the longer you fast. So if you fast for 5 days, after 20 hours, your growth hormone will start increasing very rapidly. And by day 2, by 3, day 4, day 5, it's going to just keep rising, okay, into the stratosphere. When you use growth hormone, it's going to also cause your growth hormone to rise, but you're doing it exogenously, you see? So that's why you get the anti-aging effects, because you're boosting your growth hormone artificially. So really, a lot of people like to use the growth hormone before they break their fast. So if you eat at 8 a.m., for example, you wake up, you do your thing in the morning, whatever, and then at 8 o'clock you have breakfast, you want to take your HGH before your breakfast, because after you eat, your growth hormone is going to drop. So if you take the growth hormone before you eat, when it drops, your body's growth hormone drops, you're getting that exogenous growth hormone that's keeping it elevated for longer than it normally would, you see? So now you're better able to partition your food that way. So some of the benefits of growth hormone that you're going to get right away, you'll notice this within the first couple of weeks on growth hormone. You're going to get better, deeper sleep. So you'll actually be able to sleep less, like a half hour less, and feel even more refreshed on growth hormone. You'll notice your well-being. You'll notice you're going to be able to recover quicker. You're going to notice appetite increases. You're going to notice the skin benefits. And over time, you'll notice the fat loss benefits. That takes a little longer. And the other benefits, the long-term benefits of anti-aging, will kick in the longer you stay on it, obviously. So how do you use it? As Mobster said, you don't want to overdo it with growth hormones. Just like what we talked about with testosterone. If you overdo it with the growth hormone, it can backfire, because what happens is, if you overdo it, you'll increase your insulin resistance, and we don't want that. That's why you see diabetics, bodybuilders who abuse growth hormone later on in life, they end up being type 2 diabetics, because they're boosting, and they end up with hypo symptoms and all these other side effects like carpal tunnel, and we don't want that. That's not anti-aging. Having your hands hurt, your fingers hurting where you can't even grab the weight in the weight room because of the carpal tunnel, that's not anti-aging, right? So we don't want to abuse it. So I wouldn't use more than 2 IUs a day, and even 1 IU a day would be a good start for a lot of you who want to try growth hormone. But here's the thing. Back in your day, Mobster, growth hormone was hard to find. So guys would be getting growth hormone using 4, 5, 6 IUs a day just to get that 1 or 2 IUs that they were supposed to get. So we have a generation of people who think, I got to run 5, 6, 7, 8 IUs of HGH to get benefits. And I'm telling you don't, because this Beligas HGH is legit. Yes. So you're getting good quality. You're not getting underdosed shit like you did back in your day, Mobster. So there's no need to run. I promise you, on this shit, if you run 3 or 4 IUs on this Beligas HGH,
you're going to feel it. Yeah.
You're going to get, I have a client that ran it, and he didn't listen to me. He's like, "Oh, Steve, I'm
Mm.
going to listen to what the guru said on social media, who has
Yeah, yeah,
fake followers on Instagram. I'm not going to listen to you." And he came back afterwards. He's like, "Yeah, Steve, you were right." He's like, "I had carpal tunnel. I had insulin resistance. I was
yeah,
hypo." And I said, "Dude, because the growth hormone back in those days was underdosed. So of course you got to jack it up 2, 3 times what you're supposed to run, but you don't have to do that with this. This is high quality shit." And I said, "See, now you could thank me because I'm saving you money. So now you're saving, 67% because you don't have to run 3 times as much. You can
yeah.
save money by getting the good quality stuff." So that's the key with growth hormone.
Let me talk about a couple of the Psalms here, Steve. I mean, I'll address two straight away, but let me talk about one specifically to begin with. I've been running Nutribol, aka MK677, probably now, I'm going to say slightly over 12 months. Pretty much ironically based on one of these kind of shows that we're doing and people talking about Nutribol MK677 and the mild growth hormone boosting effects, the slight enhancement to your sleep, depending on when you take it, and to a lesser degree for some people, and it completely depends what time of day you take it as well. Plus, I feel I've also got used to it. I did have this as an issue almost at the beginning, which was the appetite boosted, which makes it kind of useful for people that are underweight as well and struggle with getting volume food in. So all three of those for me, and I think this is an anti-aging issue here right straight away, Steve. The benefit, if you like, is that because first off, being the size I am, being the weight that I am, is not good for my sleep. People my size, my weight, doing what I do, are way more likely to have sleep apnea. That's just a given. You get up to 150 kilos or more, 330 pounds in old money, and you'll see people wearing sleep masks. It's just almost a fact of life. And they do try to talk about it a little bit, but it's not sort of a hot topic for people. So being big comes with a price. If you can have something which enhances your sleep and your depth of sleep and the parts of your sleep which are healing, then that has to be a benefit. And the secondary benefit here, Steve, is some of the crazy fucked up weights that I do, and again, being the size and training for the sheer length of time and my age, means that anything that boosts my growth hormone, even if it's a small amount, will help with tissue repair, joint repair. So, for example, shoulder health, knee health, hip health, that's squatting and benching and pressing and whatever else, elbows, just recovering from stuff like that. There are a number of people my age that have been killing the weights for ages that have got some kind of ongoing joint issue, and younger, as we've had on the forums recently, and I even did a topic on this, is way too many to mention. It's almost not mentioned because it's just something they've got used to. And then when you actually get into the logs and you ask them certain questions, you suddenly start to realize the amount of fellas out there, men and women, with ongoing injuries, and anything that can help heal those injuries is an absolute plus. So for me, that's around 20 milligrams a day. Two other products, and I'll let you do the other ones above, Steve.
Well, I need
The
to
final,
mention because Nutribol MK677 is actually not a SARM. So we have
yeah,
to be clear. It's sold
yes.
as a SARM. A
Yes,
SARM
it's,
company.
it's 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 on the Psalms list, but Steve's correct. Again, there's a
Yeah.
couple of products
It's
that are
a
in
HEA
well,
secret
yeah,
sauce. Yeah. So, but it does. Yeah. So, a couple of the peptides that Beligas
yeah,
has, and we want to talk about CJC 1295, IPA, and sermorelin. And they have the CJC in 2 milligrams. They have the
yeah,
sermorelin in 5 milligrams. So these are peptides that boost growth hormone benefits in the body, and they boost anti-aging. And you can stack them, or you could stack one with the Nutribol, or stack it with the growth hormone, or stack it with the testosterone, or all the above, and they work really good together. So again, you can
yeah,
come on the forum, learn more about these, and learn how to benefit from them. But a lot of people like to use these. And then the thymosin beta 4 TB500,
yeah,
they've got a 5 milligram and a 10 milligram and a BPC 157 5 milligram. And these are peptides. And these aren't growth peptides. But the reason we're talking about them is because they are repair and recovery peptides. And for
yes,
anti-aging, this is important because you get these little nagging injuries. See, the thing that you guys don't understand, who are in your teens and 20s listening to the show, those injuries that you get right now, you can work out through them, and they will most of the time repair. But as you
yeah,
get older, once you get in your 30s and 40s, there's a reason why running backs in the NFL rarely make it past 30. Okay.
mm,
or 35. Okay, when you're a Frank Gore, there's one Frank Gore for every 100 running backs. Usually they last 3-4 years in the league and then they're out. What happens is all these little bruises and injuries and ankle twists and knee twists, shoulder injuries and chest that you get as a running back, they add up. And what happens is once you get into your 30s, they don't recover in time. So the team doesn't have time to wait for your ass to get better. So they're going to find someone younger. They're going to go and draft someone in the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round because running backs ain't worth shit anymore. You don't see running back get drafted in the 1st or 2nd round anymore too often, unless they're like superstars like Christian McCaffrey. But what happens is they just use you for 3-4 years and they spit you and throw you in the trash and they get someone else younger because you don't recover the way you used to. So as you get older, you don't recover. So this is why TB 500 and BPC are really important. So TB 500, you can inject it anywhere in the body. Okay, it's going to travel. So you can inject it just in your stomach fat and it's going to help. But BPC, you got to inject into the injury as close as possible to get the best benefits. So I absolutely recommend using these together for at least 3 months. And you want to have a loading phase on these. And what I mean by that, I'll use the TB 500 as an example. The BPC you don't have to load, but the TB 500, I highly recommend you load it. So that means the first couple weeks you want to run about 10, 20, 30 milligrams total and spread out the dosing, maybe every 2-3 days, dose it. And you want to add it up to 10, 20, 30 milligrams the first couple weeks. And then over time, you can start reducing the dose. And that saves you money in the process. So you can start cutting the dose every 2 weeks in half. And then you can run less and less and less, and you'll still get the benefits. And then you can just do a regular maintenance dose every so often, maybe every 2-3 weeks, every 4 weeks, you do a maintenance dose where you run like 5 milligrams, right? And that's the way you'd run it. And look, I've run them. They're not miracles, okay? You're not going to cure a torn shoulder, okay, by using them. But I will admit they did help me with endurance and recovery and repair for a lot of these small nagging injuries that we experience as bodybuilders.
Yeah, they're not a cure-all, but the feedback that we've had, certainly since I've even become aware of them, probably about 10 years ago, Steve, from UK forums and now the American forums that you and I are part of, the feedback from people with niggling injuries that need to recover for some sporting endeavor, including weightlifting in the gym or wherever else, on these 2 peptides is incredibly positive. And I mean that not just with Beligas, obviously, but generally speaking. I've started using these products. I wish I'd used them before my recovery. I've had this niggling injury for ages, spinal, knee, ACL, stuff like that. When you've had twists and pains and whatever else, you've got to still do the rehab guides. You've still got to have the time off and whatever else. But the speeding up of recovery. And again, this is about anti-aging. So that's that sense of getting you back to where you was before. You still have to put the work in. You still have to do the rehab, as I just did. But using these healing peptides, and that's the phrase I like to use here, Steve, because that's how they're commonly seen by other people. The feedback's been absolutely amazing. Now, I'll touch upon now as we get towards the end of the show, the reason why we talk about companies like Beligas and we're saying about getting yourself a great source. Steve's touched upon it when he talked about the growth hormone, especially back in the day, Steve, when the cost was the equivalent of a working man and a half week's wages. So 10 days wages for 100 IUs of growth hormone. And it's now the equivalent of 3 days wages. So as I said, the price is kind of the same-ish, perhaps a little bit less. But in terms of the amount of days that you've got to work to earn the money to pay for 100 IUs, it's a lot less than it used to be. And that's just on the growth hormone. And for obvious reasons, back in the day, fakes like motherfuckers or underdose, like Steve said, or hadn't been treated properly, so it turned out, but it was bloody useless, and you were still punting out the cash that you had to punt out in those times. And the same can be said for a bunch of other products. One of the things we talked about with Beligas specifically, Steve, is an actual pharmaceutical company, not pharmaceutical grade, not using national standard policies for production like some of the better UGLs use, but an actual pharmaceutical company based in Belgium. And again, you go onto their website, Steve, I'll click on it as we're talking, and go to the very top of their page, and you've got certificates of authenticity and lab reports that you can click on. They've even done the work for you with a peptide calculator. You can look at the products and tell me as a potential customer, as a listener to this show, you're looking at the products, that these products look like what they are, which is pharmaceutical grade products. They're presented to you in that particular way. They use a medical-like setup in terms of the sort of products that you would see on the shelf in a pharmacy, or that you would collect from the pharmacy, from the actual pharmacist himself, not just on the shelf on the outside, but from the pharmacist itself. And they're presented in that particular way, to that level of quality production, so on and so forth. And then that's without getting into, as we talk about with a lot of approved sources, the sheer length of time that a company like that been in business and producing these products. One of the things that we talked about, just as we finish here, Steve, is I said the variety, and we're going to talk about this on another show in the not too distant future, the amount of blends that the companies produce, with they saving you in regards to testosterone blends, just looking at what customers were doing when it came to running a course of testosterones, a cycle of testosterone, looked at what was being used by those customers and produced a blend which had both those products, or three products, all in one blend for you. And I like the fact that they've done that. I was surprised when we looked at one of the resellers just how many Beligas products there was. I was thinking it was going to be 40 or 50, and I think it was over 100 products. I think like 130 different products. That was deviations for the American market and outside of American market, as well as the blends, the peptides, the sarms, growth hormone, and all of the deviations and blends of testosterone that we talked about. Any more thoughts on Beligas before we finish, Steve?
Yeah, high quality products, high quality customer service, great shipping, great customer service. As I said, A+ all around. They're a great, great brand, and I highly recommend them. So they not only have the steroids, anabolic steroids, but they also have the other stuff we talked about on this show and a lot more. So go check them out for sure. Come on the forum, check them out, find out how to get a hold of them, and you'll be very happy.
Talk about what you guys have done for anti-aging. Look at the Beligas products and what ones you use for your anti-aging protocol. Are there any healthy things that we've missed out on that we could be doing, and talk to the listeners about? Let us know what you think on the subject today. Talk about it in the comments below. Come onto the forums. Ask us about Beligas products. We always want to hear your feedback and help us improve these podcasts as well. Please note, we are not doctors, and the opinions are ours. It is our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment apply.